From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Another Kansas primary come and gone, with implications across the state. A school district threatened with dissolution hangs on. A school board election brings out thousands of voters, and you narrow the candidates for Wichita mayor down to 2. What does it all mean for you? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. This week, we're concentrating on the results of, big surprise, Tuesday's primary vote and what it all means for you. We're starting with the Wichita mayor's race, where voters cut a field of 9 candidates down to challenger Lily Wu and incumbent Brandon Whipple. Wu taking home more than 30% of the unofficial vote count to Whipple's roughly 22.5%, 23% as the numbers continue to change a little bit. So I asked, what's next?
And this is a win for Wichita.
Tuesday night appears to have been a big win for 2 mayoral candidates who will continue to battle it out for the mayor's office into November, incumbent Brandon Whipple and challenger Lily Wu. Political analyst Dr. Russell Arbin-Fox says he believes this is exactly what Whipple was hoping for.
I think this is the race, all things considered, that he preferred to have over some of the alternatives. That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy race for him, but he knows how he's going to run it.
Fox says Whipple will be able to use many of the same strategies against Wu that helped him win against Jeff Longwell 4 years ago.
A campaign where they're the underdogs in terms of financial support. He's going to be able to, trot out lines about how he's, someone who's looking to help the ordinary working population of Wichita as opposed to the business population of Wichita.
But Wu does have more money to spend right now, 3 times more than Whipple does. What she hasn't had so far in her campaign, specifics about what she wants to do as mayor.
The non-discrimination ordinance is obviously going to be something that will be brought up a lot, particularly by Mayor Whipple's supporters. And so Lily Wu is going to have to, take a clearer position on what she thinks about those matters, particularly as it pertains to city services.
And both candidates will be fighting to win over voters who picked Celeste Rissette and Brian Fry in the primary, which means, Fox says, whether you plan to vote or not, you will hear from them. From campaigners knocking on your doors to flyers in your mailbox and commercials everywhere.
You're going to see a lot of stuff done on social media. I presume that Lily Wu is going to have a really, really strong social media campaign.
A field the incumbent Whipple had to himself 4 years ago. But he is still the incumbent, giving him a reach all his own. Even as we wait for the elections office to finalize Tuesday's numbers, the Wu and Whipple campaigns are already planning their strategies. And here to take a closer look at this and other races, we have on set with you, man, you just heard, Dr. Russell Arbin-Fox, political scientist from Friends University, as well as Dr. Jay Steinmetz, political scientist from Fort Hays State University, and Polly Bazar-Wenzel, a newcomer to the show, editor of the Wichita Beacon. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to start with this. There's been, yes, it's a surprise, no, it's a surprise that we ended up with the 2 candidates we did. Let's start with what surprises did you perhaps see come out of the mayor's race Tuesday night? Polly?
Well, I was surprised that Celeste Rissette did not do better. She came in 4th. There seemed to be a lot of support for her initially because of her role in defending Century 2. And frankly, in my Riverside neighborhood, her signs were everywhere. And that is a neighborhood that tends to be politically activist. But beyond that, I guess my biggest surprise is that Wu was so far ahead of Whipple.
Now, I agree. I really was surprised by Celeste Rissette's performance. I did expect to see higher numbers for her because she had that organization in place before anybody else was even starting to think about their campaigns, and it was well-oiled. They knew each other. They knew what they were doing. But as I was talking with her on election night, one thing that she said kind of stuck with me. It was the money factor. She's like, we were all volunteers. We're struggling to get through a third of our list, trying to get out there and knock on doors and call people to make sure that they get a reminder to go vote, while Wu has all this money to pay people to do it and get into all of those different neighborhoods in a way that I simply couldn't with my volunteers.
I don't think I was terribly surprised at the results for Celeste. I mean, frankly,
She did a lot better than I initially had thought that she was going to do. She is an activist. She's not someone who had a political organization. She had an advocacy organization. And, as Jay can tell you, as anybody who studies political science and looks at the data can tell you, turning advocates into voters is not really all that easy. And so a lot of people were talking about the fact that, she had a list of 17,000 people that had signed up for her campaign to defend Century 2. It's not easy to turn all of those people into voters. So actually she did a pretty good job, especially considering the limitations that she was facing in terms of funding, in terms of actually putting together an organization that can go after these people. I mean, if you take a look at the end results, you have the incumbent and you have the best funded candidates advancing to the general. That seems to be an unsurprising result. I did actually think that Brian Fry's voters would dig into Lily Wu's more than it appears that he did. Obviously, if you put their two results together, they far outclass any other combination of voters. But then again, in the primary, you are looking at a different electorate than you will be looking at in the August primary. There's going to be a lot of a lot of those voters moving forward and kind of organizing around the remaining two candidates in ways that are fairly predictable. But there's also going to be new voters that can be captured in August. And obviously Brandon Whipple's going to have to work very hard to pull that off.
Yeah, Dr. Fox makes a really excellent point that activist politics are hard to translate into traditional electoral politics. And this is one of the reasons why our traditional party institutions are still very relevant and still very strong. Parties organize voters, they mobilize voters, and they might not be the prettiest part of American politics, parties, and we have a lot of data to show that a lot of the public don't like the traditional parties and try to, claim some kind of independence from them, but they matter a great deal. And so to translate activist politics into traditional electoral success, it can be done, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes communication work and strategy work. Another thing that a point that I'll make is that with the results, I think of Wu is the most surprising thing to me, how many votes that she had, and I think it just is an example of how money speaks in politics. Not always. Sometimes very well-funded candidates. You can think of some at the national level. Mike Bloomberg, right, running for president. There are lots of different examples in which money does not ultimately translate into votes. But at the end of the day, especially at a local and state level, the more money you have, the more success you're going to have in politics.
Mm-hmm. Now, that comes into play because 4 years ago in the Wichita race, we did have Whipple, who was the less funded candidate, actually win as the challenger against the status quo business candidate. Now Lily Wu's trying to kind of ride that fence a little bit. I'm the challenger, I'm the outsider, but I've got all this business support.
Yeah, so what we're going to see is that both Mayor Whipple and Lily Wu and their people are going to craft campaign messages that are going to have to walk an interesting tightrope. There's no reason to believe that Mayor Whipple is going to be able to come close to the amount of money that Lily Wu is going to be able to attract from her ideological supporters, from wealthier donors that typically vote Republican or typically support the kind of positions that she's associated with. And so that's going to hand him an electoral gift, which is I'm going to be able to present myself as the underdog. I'm going to be able to present myself as somebody who's fighting big money. I'm fighting dark money. I'm fighting for the average Wichitan, the working Wichitan, not the upper class, not the developer class, not the business interests. And he can do that, but it's not going to be really easy to do that because he is, of course, the incumbent mayor. And so
don't get much more insider than that.
Yeah, and so, on the one hand, you have somebody who's obviously going to be much better funded than the incumbent, but you also have somebody who is not the incumbent, who is a genuine outsider, who is a new face in Wichita politics. So they're going to want to be able to position themselves in ways that kind of balance and take the best from these two positions. Lily Wu is obviously going to make use of the money that she has on hand, but also she wants to be able to make use of it in ways that don't color her as somebody who's bought and paid for by existing interests. She's going to want to continue to present herself as the outsider. And Mayor Wimple is obviously going to want to take advantage of the blessings of incumbency, but at the same time, he's going to want to present himself as an underdog. It'll be interesting to see how they both message this.
All right. Well, some say the results of the mayoral race are due in at least some part to the turnout for the Wichita School Board at-large race, with one candidate dominating the results Tuesday night. A former state lawmaker and county commissioner Melody McCray-Miller walked away with the lion's share of the vote for Wichita's at-large school board position Tuesday night with 54%. She'll face off against conservative Brenton Davis in November. He got just shy of 24% of the vote Tuesday night. As the Wichita Eagle reports, this race is the only school board race in which the entire city gets to vote, and the only one that had enough candidates to trigger a primary. McCray-Miller told the Eagle she visited 61 of the district's 88 schools leading up to the primary. I was able to create a network, the Eagle reports, she said. They came out in numbers and supported me, and I was amazed. I'm just very pleased, very thankful for the turnout. In a written statement after the primary, Davis said he plans to work to raise test scores for Wichita students because that ensures better lifetime earnings and a better citywide economy. McCray-Miller cited teacher morale, school safety, and how to move forward without federal pandemic relief money as her top priorities if elected. The Eagle says some voters told its reporters Tuesday this race was the most important one on the ballot. And one reason for that comment, this race could really, Polly, kind of determine the direction we see the school board go for the next few years.
Obviously, there are people who are very concerned about the direction the school board will go because we, in the last race, had 3 conservatives who ran sort of as a group and were elected, and actually her challenger is the one that didn't get elected. But I think a very important aspect of this race that we can't overlook is I saw the black community organize very early. Their leaders organized around Melody because, in part, Superintendent Alicia Thompson had retired, and they felt that the Superintendent Thompson had been looking out for their kids and their interests. And without that, they were very, very concerned about the outcome of the school board race and thought Melody was their person.
Yeah, especially with the change in how we vote for the other school board positions and moving those from at-large positions to districts. Because of some of those concerns. One thing, Jay, I wanted to talk to you about was, as we look at this race, we've got somebody who's been around for a long time, Melody McCray-Miller, State House, County Commission. Her father was at the State House. It is a known name in this city. Her opponent, not so much. She also talked about how she organized. What do you see as being more important, that getting out and organizing, or that name recognition as you move into a race like this?
Well, they're obviously both important, but name recognition is really key. You know, we've got reams of data out there to suggest that name recognition is a kind of baseline in electoral politics, meaning that you can't get very far if your name recognition suffers. And this is, I think, partly why we increasingly see, especially at the national level, but we see this at the local and state level as well, more sort of celebrity politics making their way into the electoral environment. It's because name recognition matters a lot. And so to have that legacy name is very important. I also think that, education, public education, we're at kind of a crucial point in our policy area in terms of public education. We have increasing amounts of distrust and disdain of the public education system. We've got a number of different controversies or political conflicts that emanate out of education policy today. And so these races matter actually long term in terms of shaping education policy in ways that we're probably not entirely certain what the consequences are going to be 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, a point that I made during our election night coverage, the closer to home an elected position is, the more actual immediate impact it can have on your life or your children's life in this case. But as we look at these school board races and the increasing concern about the direction of schools in the state, that balances out against a state that has historically really valued its public school system and voters who have really worked to protect it.
Well, I mean, the people who supported Brent Davis pretty clearly understand themselves as protecting the public school system. It's just that their understanding of protecting it is going to be quite different from Melody McCrae Miller's understanding of it. The points that Polly and Jay made, I think, are very much on point. I would just add two things really quickly. One, while Melody McCrae Miller obviously has a much greater name recognition level in a lot of different arenas around Wichita, Brent Davis is actually pretty well known in Republican circles, in evangelical circles, homeschool circles. He's very much interwoven with the people that have been working to affect socially conservative change in institutions like the Wichita Public Schools. He was, of course, one of the 4 candidates that were backed by national and state Republican money 2 years ago, running for different seats on the school board across Wichita. I don't know if he'll get that money again this year for this at-large race, but it's quite possible. One other thing that I wanted to throw out here was that in the original presentation of the story, there was the question of whether or not, the school board vote, which was obviously really important to so many people, might have helped drive the overall vote. That's absolutely a possibility, but let's keep in mind that the turnout for primaries, municipal primaries in Wichita, while very small, has been steadily increasing over the last 10 years. And I think a lot of this goes to the fact that more and more people are kind of recognizing the unspoken but underlying partisan reality, which Jay pointed out was so important for turning people into voters. 2011 primary, 8% turnout. 2015 primary, 10%. We're up to 16%, nearly 16% in this primary. And I fully expect that in the general election in November, we may see 25, 30% turnout, which is really kind of moving us in a very positive direction, at least in terms of citizen participation.
All right. We're going to pick up that turnout question in a minute, but first, a vote in a small western Kansas district could have had implications for the entire state, but residents overwhelmingly voted to keep the district intact, defeating an attempt to dissolve it in anger over a school closure. Those pushing for the district's dissolution, though, tell Cake's Jocelyn Schifferdecker they're not giving up yet.
A school district divided. Central Plains USD 112 parents voted last night to keep their school district open. Some people in the community are relieved. One Central Plains mother in Claflin said she's, quote, happy it's over and our schools are safe. However, in another town 24 miles up the road, people are disappointed.
I'm actually very sad that our kids won't just come out and show up at lunchtime or come out after school. We won't have that.
This means the only senior and junior high in the town will remain closed. The school was shut down in early April by the school board due to enrollment and budget concerns. As students and teachers are getting ready for the new school year, all 7th through 12th grade kids in Wilson will be starting at a brand new school. But it's not the one you'd expect.
No, none of our teachers that I am aware of are going to Claflin. None of our students that I'm aware of are going to Claflin.
Instead, they will be transferring to neighboring school districts. Former Wilson School Administrator Sandy Robinson said the teens will be going to Sylvan, Russell, and Ellsworth because it's closer to their homes than the high school in their district.
But that divides our community.
This is why people who wanted the district to disorganize are taking further action. Michael Kratke, co-chair of the Wilson High School Future Committee, said students and teachers aren't the only ones heading to a change.
We'll be looking at transfer of our school out of the district into another district. And that's all based upon what we feel is the future of the school continuing.
Interim Superintendent Bill Lowry says despite the mixed reactions, he wants to work together with all the schools in the district united as one.
And we want to make sure that we're a stable district and we can continue to provide a great education for all of our students.
In Wilson, Jocelyn Schifferdecker, Cake News on your side.
Now, this would have been a first in the state if it had happened. It would have left a lot of questions up in the air about how to basically go through the practicalities of it because it's never been done before. KDSE, they've got no experience with that. They've never had to do it before, dissolve a district like that. Bullet dodged or delayed? because this is not the only district facing problems like this.
I'd say bullet delayed, in a sense that, a long time coming, not just in education, but throughout the state of Kansas, there are issues of consolidation of an older model and a declining demographic, forcing the issue in terms of just local governance and education as well. And so I think that somewhere down the road, this is going to happen. And like you said, there is no process. This hasn't happened before. So to see the first one take place and to have the process be adjudicated and deliberated by the public, I think is going to be important, because I see this as somewhat inevitable in the future.
I wonder if the fact that this didn't pass was, to a certain degree, a function of the fact that it had never happened before. That you take a look at the campaign signs that the people pushing yes were using, and it's a fresh start for our children. Well, their idea is that we're going to upset the apple cart, and we're going to be able to put it together in a way that will benefit them. Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. They were, taking a leap of faith there. And that's a hard thing for a lot of parents, especially, people that have raised their kids in small rural communities. Jay is right. At some point or another, they're going to have to wrestle with this, and I sympathize with the people who want to maybe kick it as far down the road as they can and hold on to what they have in the meantime.
Hey, I know you and I, Polly, have kind of been covering journalism, all that funny things that we put in the news for a long time now. And I know I've even worked in a couple of different school districts, and consolidation is not just a touchy word, it can be outright rancorous.
Absolutely. To speak to your point earlier about higher turnout, or the closer an issue is to you, the turnout in Wilson County over this issue is twice what we had in Sedgwick County. I think you just can't underestimate how important a local school district is to a rural community. It's a major source of jobs. It's a source of identity. The tradition of generations who've gone to a certain high school or worn certain colors, carried a certain team name, and to lose that is traumatizing to the people that have been doing that for a long time. I mean, look at North High here in Wichita. There was years of resistance to changing the name of the mascot, which we won't say. But, and I recently went to my husband's 50th high school reunion he grew up in Greenleaf, Kansas, and he had to get transferred because they consolidated schools over to Washington County. And at the 50th reunion, you could still feel the pain in these students that their district had ever been consolidated years later. So we can't underestimate the power of that.
The word that Polly used there is tradition. I think that's key, right? And it bridges what Dr. Fox had said as well, that traditional small town Kansas values of traditionalism, conservative values of traditions of the past that we preserve, are an important part of the fabric of these communities. And so it's not just like a practical decision in the present about reorganizing institutions like education. It's about how do we preserve our past identity here in the present, especially in light of these challenges, especially in light of demographic decline and other things.
All right. Well, getting back to that question of voter turnout, here in Sedgwick County at least, this primary had an unexpectedly high turnout. KSN News reports Tuesday's voter turnout for the 2023 primary election was higher than anticipated. That's according to Sedgwick County Commissioner Laura Rainwater. Rainwater says 15% of registered voters cast their ballots on Tuesday or sent in an advanced ballot. She was expecting turnout to hover around 10 to 12%. Voter turnout will actually go up over the next few days as more ballots continue to be counted. Rainwater said, "We still have mail ballots that will come in that were dropped off today. We also have ballots dropped in drop boxes that are left to count." Rainwater also told KSN she's surprised by the high voter engagement this year and doesn't know what's causing this high turnout. Voter turnout is typically around 10% during primaries. Last summer's primary saw a record 45% turnout when abortion rights were on the ballot. So any ideas what's driving this increased turnout? We kind of mentioned increased paying attention after the pandemic. We've also kind of talked a little bit about name draw and what we saw in the school board race here in the Wichita area, perhaps driving turnout a little bit. Polly, what do you think?
I think it's not just whether or not people are interested in the school board race. We had 2 citywide races. That was not true the last time Whipple was elected because of the they vote on the school board members in routine. So the fact that there were 2 citywide races, I think, definitely contributed to what was basically a 50% increase in turnout.
Yeah, that's a big increase.
I want to go back to a point that I made earlier, which is I think that obviously there are lots of reasons to bemoan the polarization of the American electorate and the way people hunker down in their ideological tribes, and it makes compromise very difficult, it makes legislating very difficult. But the truth of the matter is that, as Jay said earlier, parties are the best tool that has ever been developed in the history of mass democracy to turn people who care about issues into voters. Obviously, school board elections are nonpartisan, and citywide election and municipal elections are nonpartisan. This is by statute in the state of Kansas. And yet, as people become more and more aware of, well, the Republican interest groups are supporting this candidate, the Democratic interest groups are supporting this candidate, it motivates people, it gets them involved. And so I think the growing recognition of the underlying partisanship in the school board races and in the municipal races is a story of this rising turnout.
Dare I say there are positives to partisanship and polarization. And one of the positives is that it can be good for democracy. You can mobilize voters and you can get people to be passionate about policy and issues. And there are a lot of salient political issues in our political environment today in the United States of America. And that's a good thing for democracy if we believe in our institutions of democracy. So I'll go back to a point that I've made in prior shows, which is my biggest concern in politics today is our declining distrust in our democratic institutions. Arguably, when these institutions are functioning at their best in American history, we have increasing levels of distrust and increasing levels of cynicism with regards to our elections system, the apparatus of our democracy, the machinery of our democracy, and that is not good. When you've got millions of voters who think that there are fraudulent, corrupt elections and that there are players behind the curtain who are fixing everything. This is not Russia. This is the United States of America. And there are many, many reasons to be proud of our democratic system. If we believe in our institutions of governance, go for the polarization, go for the partisanship, fight it out in not just in activism, but fight it out in the ballot box and in our electoral environment. That's what democracy is all about.
Would a third choice be possible, a third of ranked choice voting? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, ranked choice voting has shown to be very effective in a lot of environments, and it gives more voter preferences. We've done a lot of research in political science to show that majoritarian, winner-take-all, first-past-the-post systems don't give a lot of faith.
And I'm going to have to cut you off there. I'm so sorry. We are out of time, folks, just as we were getting a great debate going on. Thanks again for joining us. We'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN News, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. Have a great week.